Good evening, everyone. Today, we're going to talk about pentatonic scales and its significance in the music of blues, in its vernacular. And of course, everyone is familiar with the pentatonic scale. That's kind of the first scale you learn when you pick up a guitar. Not necessarily is the case for a piano, but when you pick up a guitar, yeah, it's certainly one of the first scales you ever learn. So let's start with, basically telling you what the pentatonic scale is. Well, it's just the name implies it's a scale with five notes in it. Hence, the penta means five notes. So there are five notes in a pentatonic scale, and this scale is widely famous across the entire world. Actually, it's one of the most universal scales that human beings use all across the world. You can find this scale used in folk music in China, from the Orient all the way to the West, Scotland, even in Africa. It truly is one of the most universal scales, music language that we have, and it's quite very very interesting because how the pentatonic scale incorporated into the blues music was, of course, because blues when it was made by African Americans was a folk style music, and that pentatonic scale it originated mostly from folk origins. Naturally, that the pentatonic scale would be what people used for the music, for the first music of blues. And so let's there are many reasons for that. Why the pentatonic scale, you might ask? How did it come about? Why are people so inclined to use it, to sing it, to play it globally? And there's, well, like I say, there are several reasons. Well, first of all, the blues scale is very harmonious. It sounds very good. And the five notes, how it's laid out, there's no dissonance to it. The scale flows very nicely. And then there's one of the second reasons is also because it is the first five sequential notes from the overtone series. Now that the overtone series is a physical, if it's a physical manifestations of how sound works. So here I can cite probably Leonard Bernstein, one of his first lectures in the Harvard series of talks, where he actually explained how overtone works. And what's fascinating about that is that the pentatonic scale, the first five notes that originates from the overtone phenomenon, are the five notes in the pentatonic scale. So a big reason is because subconsciously, us human beings being involved over many thousands of years, we started to subconsciously break down the sound in digging it deeper into the layers of the overtone series, and we started to uncover the pentatonic scale little by little, and that's hence how it was adapted to be so culturally universal, and it's a very vital scale that's just been used worldwide. I'm sure there are more reasons to that, but these are the two that I can think of that played a very important role in how that came about. So then let's transition to the usage of the pentatonic scale in blues. Obviously, it's a tool for folk music a lot. So naturally, it was the language that was used to make the music of blues. And the pentatonic scale has since blues music got so popular, the pattern of the pentatonic scale, through the influence of early blues music, jazz music, rock and roll, and they're certainly very 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 cliche patterns, cliche riffs that you can remember. Those are all generated from the pentatonic scale. Played by so many rock and roll people that we know and love. And for example, B.B. King, Jimi Hendrix, Eric Clapton, Robert, all of those people, etc. The list goes on and on. And they've known, and they've also influenced how blues was played. And they brought their own flavors and their own tendencies and their own little riffs into the music. And all this big conglomerate of all the famous people that have played it, it started to mix into the versatile blues that we have today. So to moving on from this, what are some of the ways that we can use the pentatonic scale? Obviously the minor pentatonic scale, one of the most used ones for blues if you're improvising. But there are other ways that you can also incorporate different kinds of pentatonic scale, besides the minor pentatonic, because it gets very boring if you just play that day in and day out. So let's talk about some creative ways we can incorporate that and make our blues playing more interesting, more diverse, more in depth, and also to expand our knowledge of what the pentatonic scale could be, because there's not only just one, there's also other variants of it. So let's discuss first of all the pentatonic scales used in blues. Now I find it very fascinating, harmony wise, that blues, especially 12-bar blues. Of course, blues started being very, very different forms of harmonies with it. There's New Orleans blues, earlier age, and then they started to evolve into this very standard, not cookie cutter, but very standard and very famous. The 12-bar blues are revolved around dominant chords, and I've always find that very fascinating, and I just want to kind of break that down into why it's so fascinating. And because of this, what happens to the scales that you use, how you improvise. So let's first of all look into the dominant chord, and that's a whole can of worms that we can open. So the dominant chord is made up from the root, its major third, its fifth, and the minor seventh, and those are the four notes that's in a dominant seven chord. And first of all, immediately, what's really interesting about this is that it is incorporating a major third and a minor seventh. Now these are two notes that wouldn't really go together in a scale, whether major or minor. So immediately there's this very ambiguous nature about the dominant seven chord. That, and also the history of the dominant seven chord being used mostly in classical music for resolutions to the tonic of the scale. But that dominant seven chord with the ambiguity of the major and the minor put together, and then have this very, when it's adapted into blues, into the harmony of blues, has this very melancholy, very ambiguous feeling that can swing the mood any ways. That's why blues can exhibit so many interesting moods. It can be kind of happy, it can be very sad, and it can be just very pensive. And that's why it's also so fun to play the blues, because you can take it so many ways. So the ambiguity of the dominant chord really opens up a lot of fun things about improvising over blues. So because of the fact that it's both major and minor, there are two ways immediately that you can use the pentatonic scale. So besides the number one is the very cliched and just overplayed minor pentatonic scale, and the second is the major pentatonic scale. And you often hear this in a lot of blues riffs, a lot of blues passages, that the incorporation between the major and the minor, and that you hear in a lot of very, very famous riffs. There are little snippets where it kind of goes from major to minor and minor back to major, and that gives that really just beautiful feeling that it just really warms your heart. And so we can take that. It doesn't need to be a snippet, because you can expand into whole phrases where it goes from major to minor, minor to major. Here I can show some examples below in how we can play that in a regular, blues 12-bar progression, and just kind of toggle between major and minor. And these effects are really powerful, especially doing chord changes when you're going from the 1 dominant chord to the 4th dominant chord. So the examples we're using will be in C, in the key of C. So we'll go from C7 and then to an F7. Now that transition, especially if you switch this around the pentatonic scale, it sounds just very incredible. It takes you out of the moment and it brings you back to the moment, and it's both very harmonious and also very interesting. This is the one of the key reasons how we can be very creative when it comes to blues improvising. Not only don't get just in the mindset of the minor pentatonic scale, but slips in some major pentatonic scale and really makes it up. And I think the other ways that I'm still currently experimenting will be there are other forms of pentatonic that we can use as well. One of the ways I can think about is that if you look at a pentatonic scale, if you look at a dominant chord, so say we're back in the key of C again. If you're looking at a C7, and one of the primary uses is for resolutions. So that C7, in the classical sense of the term, wants to resolve, and it's wanting to resolve to an F. Whether it's an F minor or F major, it doesn't matter, but it has that tendency to resolve. So we can use that and use that pentatonic scale as an implying resolution. That means that if you're hearing a C7 and I'm thinking, okay, so it might be going to an F. If it's going to an F, I can imply that by using an F pentatonic. And that's a very interesting way to take this. It kind of splits off from the regular pattern that we use and use something that's very, very interesting. And it's very, very thought-provoking. So if we're using F as a pentatonic, and in which I'll break it down right here, and I'll play that for you. So it's in two possibilities, whether if it's resolving, where if we're implying that it's going to an F minor, or if we're implying that it's going to an F major. And then if it's going to an F minor, the scale is as such. it's going to a F major, then the scale is as such. So we take those notes from the scales, and we have them, but we don't start on that F, we start on that C. So we essentially turn this into a mode of the pentatonic scale. And this is a concept that's actually also existed in Chinese traditional music. In the pentatonic scale, the notes are called gong, shang, jiao, zhi, yu, and there's 5 of them. Each one has a name, and they're actually keys that's generating from starting at a different note of the scale, which is essentially modes. So using that idea, we've taken this implying resolution and actually making 2 different kinds of modes of the pentatonic, and that we're also going to try and slip into this right here. So we have these modes, 2 extra modes from the the implied resolution of this dominant chord. We can also kind of weave them in between the blues scales that we regularly use. That's actually the C pentatonics. So and here we really fun kind of experimenting in between. To kind of weave this in between. So here is something that I have so far. So as you see, if you using that mode, going from a minor mode of pentatonic into a major pentatonic, when you weave them together, has a very, very interesting effect. And same for the opposite side, if you're going from a major to a minor. And so I find that very, very interesting that you can use that, incorporate that into a little bit of blues playing to make everything a little bit more interesting, a little bit more in depth. And that's something also a very good tool to use, especially if you're playing jazz music. So that's so far what I think about the pentatonic scale and how it's so significant in the use of in the language of blues, and and also some of the ways that we can take it into another level. So I hope you find this very, very helpful. And again, my name is Zed, and if you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment below, and please subscribe and like the video. Thank you.